Welcome to another edition of Defender Fridays. We're a week before Friday the 13th. And I don't know, next week might be something spooky. We'll see what everyone's got in store for us. Who knows? But dude, it's great to have you here, Carlos. Thank you so much. I want to drop a little bit of history and knowledge for everyone here. I've actually taken a class from Carlos in the past. Carlos, I believe it was one that you taught at DerbyCon way back in the day.
So I taught automating Metasploit, PowerShell,
Yes.
and Mimikatz.
Yes, it was the Mimikatz one. Yeah.
Okay.
It was
Cool.
the meme, and I was like, I just remember sitting there and being like, okay, usually I'm a talkative student, right? I always feel like everyone is a student. So if you ask questions and stuff like that, but the content for that one, I was just like, oh my gosh, I just need to sit and just listen and absorb all this. And it was such an awesome class. It was great having you. I'm also a little reminiscent because it was at DerbyCon and we no longer have DerbyCon, but everyone used to descend on Louisville, Kentucky for a weekend. And it was a magical weekend for sure. But it's great to have you here, sir. And thank you so much for being here. I love the TrustedSec rep on there is just awesome. So we'd love to hear more about Carlos, like where are you at? What are you doing these days? What's going on and everything like that? And then I think you've got a topic for us on open source libraries. But first, please introduce yourself to the Defender Friday crowd.
So I'm currently the director of Security Intelligence at TrustedSec. So I have many hats, I would say. So I work with the marketing team in terms of content for all of our different webinars and making sure that I'm able to align a lot of the stuff that the different teams do to the market needs of our customers. In addition to that, I work in terms of threat intelligence, looking at what is going on and passing that information over to our purple team and our incident response team. And I also participate in many of our incident response engagements. So I'm an IR guy, offensive tooling guy, threat intel guy, marketing content guy. I have, as I mentioned, way too many hats.
That's okay. I find that a lot of us these days, like we tend to wear too many hats because I feel like there's some things you just can't let go of. You know what I mean? Like incident response for me is just one of those things where like every now and then you got to get that fix. You know what I mean? You're just like, oh, what's this juicy malware going on over here? And not that I give bad guys compliments a lot, but Carlos, I don't know if you feel the same way, but sometimes like an incident pops up and you're just like, all right, let's go hunting. Like someone dumps a puzzle on a table and you're like, all right, let's put it together. Here we go. But
what I like is that I'm able to kind of like bring the mentality of an attacker to the IR engagement. So sometimes we're going through an engagement and we're looking at the timetable and I'm looking at the different events and I'm quickly can tell to the IR guys, hey, he's going to do this, this, and this because the way that he's positioning everything is to do this other task.
Yeah.
Like I'm seeing a lot of credential harvesting. I'm seeing a lot of access to shares. There has to be some exfiltration. So we need to look for compression and movement of stuff. We need to look at the firewall because more than likely they did a SOX proxy at one point. So we got to look at the firewall logs because there's going to be a process that is not normal, that is going to be talking HTTP there. And they're going like, oh, cool. So I can kind of like put the mentality of the attacker in terms of the attack paths that I would take to the IR guys. And I'm, as I mentioned, I'm kind of like old school hacker in the terms that I like knowing a bit about everything that I'm doing. So when I'm developing all of my tools, at the same time, I'm keeping a list of all of the IOCs. I like knowing what my tool does. For example, I started playing with Impacket. So what I ended up doing, I ended up not playing with the examples, but building a full tool set for myself with the Impacket library. So I can learn the Impacket library at the same time I look at packet captures. I'm looking at the event logs. I'm looking at Sysmon events. I'm looking at what am I leaving behind? Because back in the day, your value to the community and how you were respected in the community back in the late 90s, early 2000s was like, how well did you know the tools and how they worked? And the technology behind it. And nowadays, it's more, I call them tool monkeys. People just know the tool. They don't know what's happening behind the scenes, what IOCs are getting generated or stuff like that. They just know, oh, hammer, oh, I hit, breaks. But not everything's a nail.
Yeah, I gotta say, man, like, okay, so I'm gonna give a little bit of a shout out here to Eric and Whitney, who I know Eric and Whitney are both on. They're with us. I'm not sure if camera's on, but nonetheless, it doesn't matter. Whitney, I see Whitney. Okay, cool. Whitney's there. when like the process you just described. So for Defender Friday, folks, you'll recognize about a month ago we were at the Black Hat DEF CON time. It was Hacker Summer Camp, and this process you're describing of going through and like really understanding like what the tools do and what's left behind. First off, I just want to give a quick PSA to every single adversary out there. Number one, you're not as quiet as you think. No. Number one, like you are not as quiet as you think. Two, that's actually something that we spend a ridiculous amount of time on in a good way, but is like, let's take a look at the artifacts that are left behind. And let's take a look at actually kind of piecing together that chronological order of how things happened. And man, I'm glad to hear that you do the same thing, because you come at it from that offensive mindset, trying to understand like how the different pieces are put together. I think that's such a fascinating way to look at things. But I got to ask, like, do you ever look at an IR and then you're kind of like, oh, that was a dumb move? Like, come on, that was a silly thing to do.
In fact, what I tend to say to myself more often that I like to admit is like, how the hell is this still working? Like, so I'm looking at all of the IRs. I'm looking at all of the TTPs. I'm looking at everything that is going on. I look then at the console at Cyber Reason. I look at the CrowdStrike console. Or I look at the SIM, and I go like, why aren't you guys detecting this? I see it in the SIM, clear as day. Why aren't you guys? Or for example, recently I was in an engagement. They were using QRadar. They had everything over UDP, so all of the logs were truncated, and it was going like, so you guys never done a, purple team exercise, a tabletop exercise? Look at this. Because all of a sudden I'm seeing PowerShell launching cmd.exe, cmd.exe, wscript.exe. Come on, like how often? And then I'm able to just via Velociraptor, I just capture all of the different event logs. I put everything into a CSV. Then with a bit of PowerShell, I put everything and go like, you see that MSHTA has only been ran in your environment 2 times in the last 3 months, and the only 2 times have been malicious. PowerShell, all of this is standard. This is not. You should be able to capture outliers. And I'm seeing a lack of the basics. Over focus on tooling, like my EDR is going to detect everything, but then they don't tune it. Or I see, basically that. Oh, my EDR, I have an EDR. I've been to environments where they're not ingesting logs and go, oh, but I have an EDR. And the EDR has logs, and go like, you know that there are gaps, right? Same thing like vulnerability management. I used to work at Tenable, and and people cringe when I tell them like, you know that your checks for vulnerabilities, sometimes the vulnerability came out and there's no check until 1 week, 2 weeks later. And some of those checks may never appear, because I remember Tenable, we were getting like 900 CVEs a day or 300 CVEs a day, and we're looking through all of those. And as a manager or a director, I was going and marking them, won't do, won't do, won't do, won't do, won't do. Don't have resources, don't have resources, don't have resources, because it's a gear or software that we cannot acquire. Oh, this one, yes, we can. And then I would prioritize given our telemetry. And people has way too much confidence on the tools and what information they're given by them. Which is scary.
I feel like you're calling out like an important kind of underlying reliance. I'm going to call it a false sense of security, where it's almost like, oh, I bought and installed this thing, therefore we're all set. And I think that there's definitely a lot of like education that needs to happen about coverage and coverage gaps, and then also where like the security team should actually come in, and I feel like today there's definitely a percentage where it's like, okay, like my team doesn't have to do XYZ because we bought this thing that does that thing for us, so we're set. But then that means we have to focus on the areas where we don't have coverage or where we have gaps, and understand that.
It's like tuning.
Like
I remember coming from product and also being on the consultant side, there's this concept of friction that a lot of people don't get. That is that the vendor's going to develop their product with a base set of signatures, either vulnerability scanner, EDR, AV, where it provides at least friction to the customer, so the least number of false positives. So it's a very tight approach with not a lot of coverage. They're default installed. So a lot of people do default installs. I remember working as a vendor where somebody's buying a solution from us and go like, awesome. So you're spending $200,000, $300,000 on this solution. Hey, by the way, your 2 or 3 people are going to administer this in the cloud. They need training. That's $5,000. And go like, $5,000 for training? No, that's too much. You guys think you're SANS or something? And go like, no, but you need to administer this platform. You need how to tune it, how to set it up. And people don't buy that training. Same thing. And that then leads to EDRs being default and people not raising that level up of verbosity of detections and then tuning out all of that noise out of the product. I've been to environments where they had a very good CrowdStrike engineer, an analyst that did all of the tuning. And if I would have done a whisper in that network, I would have been caught. Like it was a total nightmare. And it was just that the person knew how to use the tool, knew their environment, had a clear inventory, and applied everything that they needed to do.
Oh, you dropped a magic word in there, sir. You said inventory. That's another one where it's
that
like
goes to the subject of today.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. There we go. So let's bring that in. Supply chain issues. So I believe you came in with a topic, supply chain issues with open source libraries, and I want to let you start to kind of delve into that a little bit here. And what you got on your mind?
So I've always worked in research, building tools. So we're always using PyPy, we're using NPM, we're using Ruby gems, all of that kind of stuff. And then when I go to my customers and I tell them like, hey, there have been over 100,000 this year malicious NPM packages. Have you looked at those? What do you mean? Have you opened the GitHub advisory page at least? Because a lot of that stuff don't have CVEs, and they're going like, oh, no, everything that we do needs a CVE. We're like, well, that's kind of broken. But if you look at this, you go into GitHub and you look, or you're searching Google GitHub advisories, and it lists everything that they have flagged inside of GitHub itself. And then you go into and say, give me everything that you've tagged as malware. All of a sudden, you're going to see PyPy, NPM. And many times I talk with developers, like when you're developing your software and you're doing your requirements.txt, are you guys in your daily stand-ups? If you're using waterfall, agile, whatever fits your fancy, are you checking those, that there's no typos, that you have solid versions, that if somebody did an upgrade, you didn't automatically upgrade blindly to it and checking? No. Because a lot of that stuff gets missed by vulnerability scanners. Tenable, Qualys, Rapid7, everybody misses it because it's not part of an MSI packet. It's not on RPM. It's not a deb package that they can just query. It is something that the developer added, did a configure, make install. So it gets missed by all vulnerability scanners. So it's something that developers are putting in. But when you look at GitHub, you're starting to see a bunch of specific attacks against crypto wallets. That's kind of like the big ones. You start looking at some of the stuff, and some of the stuff looks, when you look at threat intel and you kind of match campaigns and stuff, a lot of stuff looks Korean, North Korean, a lot of stuff looks Chinese, a lot of stuff starts looking Brazilian in terms of those packages, targeting all of that stuff. But when I talk with customers, that is one of their areas of inventory that they're not even touching. Nowadays, they're starting to just worry about browser extensions, because all of a sudden we have Chinese groups and North Korean groups. When they get in, they start injecting malicious browser extensions as a way of persistence or gathering additional data. Now they care about browser extensions because it was in the news. But NPM and PyPy packages, in terms of open source, there's a ton of them. And a ton of them are malware. A ton of them get flagged. For example, I was recording today's tech brief, and one of the things that I was talking about at the beginning was about in PyPy packages, there are over 20,000 of them that right now the developer had just simply abandoned and deleted from maintaining. So the only thing I have to do is I just have to go into PyPy and add my own malicious package with the same name. And when the person does pip upgrade, it's downloading my malicious one. There's no signatures getting checked. There's no other ancillary checks being done in the PyPy database. And all of a sudden, I have shell throw out a bunch of hosts.
Yeah.
And I've seen it myself. I administer a PowerShell module called Posh SSH. It
Mhm.
has millions of downloads. And I remember I did a version. I pushed that out this week. And before I was actually able to just go in and do the tweet and write it out, and I tweeted it and I go back, in less than 2 minutes, I had 200 something downloads. And the first thing that ran through my head as a security guy is like, nobody checking this. Like, they didn't check if it was broken, if it had flaws, if it could be malicious. And then I'm like, I could probably add telemetry and find out who's downloading all of this stuff. Well, it turns out that there was a bug, and there's this very giant cloud provider that uses it. And they quickly open a email directly to me and go like, hey, dude, I'm the product manager of so-and-so. You have this bug here, and it's breaking our entire pipeline. Can you fix it the next day? And go like, So they downloaded my PowerShell module that I write on my spare time that have no tests. And they're running across this gigantic multi-million-dollar cloud platform to automate all of stuff. And they're not testing.
Yeah. Not only that, they've built an entire business on top of it, I'm guessing, too.
Yes.
Which is wild as well. So, Carlos, I'm curious. I just threw a couple of links in the chat for everyone. I actually started like pouring through the GitHub advisory database, and there's a perfect example here of, I guess, a particular project that has been compromised, and there's like just straight malicious code inside of it. I'm curious, how does PyPy then learn about these things? Like, do you have any insight into how the package managers themselves actually learn about it? Because I think, as you said, like, they're not testing. No, they're not looking for this. So they themselves are waiting for what? Reporting? Or for like community reporting?
Yep.
Okay. So this is very much akin to, go ahead.
The only one that I found that does some static checks was Ruby Gems. After they had a bunch of issues, they had some static checks in. The other one is the PowerShell gallery from Microsoft. I remember when all of a sudden they started doing actual virus checks on it, just running static checks. All of a sudden, I remember Matt Graber started having problems with PowerView. And Will Schroeder started having problems with other modules that he kept. And from the PowerShell Mafia back from the day. And they got banned, and they had to talk with Lee Holmes and get all of that stuff fixed. But a lot of them actually don't do any checks. The volume of updates and checks, or many times they just point somewhere else. They're pointing to another repository somewhere that the person goes like, hey, here's my package, just link to it and download it from there.
Wow. I gotta like process that for just a moment and think about the number of like just blind, I'm just going to call them blind dependency updates. You know what I mean? Where if you've got some sort of like pip-r upgrade inside of like a Docker container or something, and it's just automatically all the time just pulling, and then there's other stuff going on. I mean, I'm just looking at the advisory database here. For anyone who's curious, by the way, there's 19,936 reviewed advisories. There's 227,000 unreviewed advisories. So loose basic math tells me there's about 9% coverage. And 9% of these have actually been reviewed, which I think is just wild. But yeah, I mean, there's some pretty big ones in here.
And just list full malware and just start seeing pi, npm, npa, pi, npm.
Yeah.
And you look at the names, and all of the names are typos of existing ones.
Okay. I'm looking at it. Yeah. I see. I'm looking through these now. I figured out the best way to sort them. For anyone who's curious, by the way, there's a path traversal vulnerability in Stripe CLI. Maybe you might want to know about that, but I'm just going to throw that out there and say this is like a really cool source of information here. I feel like I want to spend a little more time looking through this one now, just because.
And ask your developers, do you check for this?
Yeah.
Like, oh no, I just created my requirements.txt and I only check that. I remember when Log4j came out, SBOM became cool in the government circle. Now everybody wanted SBOM. And I remember having to work with my teams and coming up with SBOMs. And then we started first with static SBOMs, were our requirements.txt files that we had for all of that. And then when we decided, so-and-so in research, and this was around 8 years ago, wrote a Python script that is going to look now for the dynamic ones. And I'm like,
Mhm.
awesome. And when we look at that list, here's my requirements TXT, and then this gigantic list of dynamic dependency, loading dependency, loading dependency. And I'm going like, so this NPM downloaded this other NPM, and this one downloaded 20 other NPM packages, and this other one downloaded a bunch of all of these other ones. So, and when we started looking at some of those packages, we started getting afraid as a security company because we were seeing that it was one single person maintaining it as a hobby somewhere. And somebody that has run, for example, DNS Recon, I no longer maintain it. It's still under my control, but I have other developers now working on it because I just don't have the time. But
Yeah.
it's people that I've vetted and trusted, but other developers don't do that. They just go like,
Mhm.
I don't care anymore about this. This is no longer sexy. I don't want to maintain it. Who wants it? And they give it away to somebody else.
Yeah.
Like the other person to ask them, hey, I'm going to control this, or I want to do it. And they don't go. I remember we started going through the process of doing static analysis on all of our dependencies. So
Mhm.
as soon as we updated all our npm and PyPy packages, we would go like, okay, here's our static, here's our dynamic. Did in the dynamic sense, did we added any additional ones? Yes, no. Okay, let's scrap those. And we bought a bunch of commercial static analysis and we threw them at it.
Mhm.
But in our case, is that back in my previous job, our software was used by intelligence agencies and DoD and other places where we had to go through that process to
Mhm.
get certifications, to get accepted to be used, and so we could sell the product. But a lot of companies just hire a developer somewhere, develop this for me, and they don't even ask like, what are the requirements? And that's never added into your inventory database. So all of a
Yeah.
sudden you see an advisory file library and go like, okay, do we suffer from this?
No idea.
No, I don't find it here, but
Yeah.
it's somewhere. That's why Log4j kind of like opened the Pandora's box there a lot of
I
years.
did a webcast a little while ago with an organization that I think specialized in like package analysis, like dependency analysis and that kind of stuff. Long story short, if I remember the figures correctly, I know I'm going to give the minimum number here. They went to like the tertiary level of importing. So for primary level, it would be like your requirements.txt. Secondary would be what those packages import, and then tertiary would be what those packages subsequently import. And he's like, the problem is you can go to like a fifth or a sixth level in some cases, but tertiary level, they just stop their analysis there. They found that I think a requirements.txt with like 5 packages in it for simple stuff, like maybe
Mhm.
date time parsing or something like that, could at a tertiary level end up importing close to 70 different packages. And they had this kind of projection rate where they were like, yeah, you can go, and it's not obviously all the case, but you could go from 5 per primary, 20 secondary, 70 tertiary. And they're like, think about that like simple script or that simple web app that someone created. Now you've got 70 different things. And their discussion point was like, this is a lot for humans to look at and consider. And I was like, well, let's just back up a little bit and first like try to wrap our heads around the amount of packages being imported here. Number one, can we bring that number down? Like, let's start there, and then we can get to the point of like, are these outdated? Are they even maintained? Have they been replaced by stuff? And then I start to think about the XZ kind of developer crisis or whatever you want to call it that came out recently. We covered that where you had a someone become a trusted developer inside of a group and was intentionally trying to push malicious code through. And I feel like there's got to be some checks and balances in place. And hearing the way that you guys went through this, it just makes so much sense because you've
Yeah,
got to protect that code.
oh yeah, and a perfect example of this is a friend of mine got hired to do a red team engagement against a consultancy that does pen tests. And the way he got in was that he developed a kind of like basic recon tool in Python. He registered his own malicious PyPy package. And then he did keying for it. So it would only trigger on machines and accounts that were for this consultancy. And he just simply went to them and go like, hey, dude, I wrote this tool. I want to get your feedback. You're very
Mm.
well known in the community. Can you check it out? And the guy downloaded it into his Mac, installed it, ran it. But he made a mistake on his Python code and it blew an error, but it never executed. So
Mm.
if he would have just dedicated a bit more QA time, he would have caught one of us, a regular hacker, a regular infosec person, and who knows what they would have been able to find in reports and stuff that would be in that laptop.
Yeah, that's crazy, man. Just, I mean, a little, wow, you know, like the tiniest little thing, you never know, right? I love that. That's such a cool, I think it's a really good emphasis as well. And this can start a whole separate discussion, which we won't get into, but I think it also has a really cool emphasis on why like learning how to code is still an important part of security, not just kind of mashing tools, but also understanding kind of like what's happening in the background and at least having some idea. You know what I mean? To Whitney's point there, it's always some mundane detail. It's also always DNS as well. We'll just drop both of those in there. But nonetheless, Carlos, man, this has been really cool. We have a couple of minutes left. I wanted to give you some time. First off, like, what do you got going on in the future? I know sometimes you're usually around traveling, teaching and stuff like that, number one. And then number two, like, where can folks get a hold of you or kind of learn more about what you're working on?
Okay, so main job, TrustedSec. So I think the most public stuff I do, at least for my main job, is the tech briefs that come out every Monday, where I go over some of the news and the vulnerabilities of the prior week. Personal side, I'm starting to just start recording a bit more for my own channel, for my YouTube channel, Atomic Hacking. I took it from, Atomic Habits, small chunks of information that kind of build up from the atomic sense. So the initial stuff is I'm just documenting Posh SSH. It's so big. I have, it's kind of weird. It's not security per se, but I think over 30 million downloads already for it.
Nice.
From the PowerShell gallery, which makes me nervous every time I push an update. I'm going to break AWS. I'm going to break Microsoft. I'm going to
just throw into prod, man. That's how everybody does it. Just
and they do. Both of them do. they throw my prod, which it worries me. And yeah, my Twitter handle is Carlos_Perez. Not now that I'm a bit more public with my work, and my private side are a bit more interchangeable. I'm kind of like, I have actually a filter when I talk now in social media. I stay a bit more quiet.
There we go.
But I'm known to have no filter, which is kind of like a reputation.
I remember.
I should fix or not.
I remember. Yeah. Are you teaching anywhere anytime soon?
So far, I have not. I used to be more active with the Marine Corps, Marforce Cyber, as an auxiliary. I was teaching for them offensive, defensive coding, Mimikatz, Packets, Sysmon, a bunch of different stuff. But I actually closed my duns. I couldn't have. It was way too much travel and stuff. So right now, I'm not teaching any classes per se. But I decided to kind of like polish a bit on the Impacket side. So probably I may have a class next year on Impacket, where I'm showing like, here are the different examples, how you use them. Here's how you code a bit around them. Now that Delphi no longer maintains Mimikatz, I don't know if I'm going to continue teaching that class. So we'll see.
I got you. Awesome. Carlos, it's been great having you here, man. We're right at time. Thank you so much for joining us and just dropping all these awesome knowledge bombs on us. For anyone who's watching, we'll gather the links and then post them all into the Slack channel for us. But Carlos, again, great to see you again. Glad you're doing well. Loving the background, loving the history, loving everything, man. Congrats to you. Best of luck. And man, keep making awesome content because the rest of us like benefit so immensely from it. So thank you. And thanks for being here and love having you on the show, man. It's great having you. Thank you.
Thank you.
To everyone else, I'll see y'all same time next week where it's going to be Friday the 13th. Time to get spooky. We'll see. I don't know. We're going to figure something out, but it's not Halloween month just yet. But nonetheless, everyone, thanks for being here as always. And we'll see you again soon. Take care.